Winning an Oscar is supposed to launch a career into the stratosphere, but for some actors, it did the opposite. From industry retaliation to catastrophic follow-ups and Hollywood mismatches, these wins became turning points for all the wrong reasons. Today, we're breaking down the stories of 7 actors whose golden moment led to years of struggle. Number 1. Cuba Gooding Jr. There's a moment right after Cuba Gooding Jr. won the Oscar in 1997 where his future seemed inevitable, and that brief moment is the key to understanding everything that went wrong. Cuba entered the 90s with the kind of momentum actors dream about. Boys and the Hood made him a breakout talent. A Few Good Men proved he could hang with heavyweights. Outbreak showed he could handle blockbuster scale, but he was still a charismatic supporting player, someone audiences recognized, but studios hadn't fully figured out how to use. Then came Jerry Maguire, and Rod Tidwell didn't just steal the movie, he hijacked the cultural moment. The line in this scene, "Show me the money," became a global mantra. Cuba's high-voltage charisma pulled every spotlight in the room onto him, even away from Tom Cruise. And that's where the Oscar curse begins. The performance was so fun, so loud, and so meme-friendly that Hollywood misread what they were actually looking at. Instead of recognizing a gifted supporting actor with incredible comedic timing and emotional snap, studios tried to turn him into a marquee name overnight. Agencies marketed him like the next Will Smith. Leads poured in, not because they were good fits, but because they were commercial, and the roles he accepted reflected that misread. Chill Factor, Boat Trip, Snow Dogs, Radio, Daddy Day Camp, a streak of projects that felt engineered for maximum paycheck and minimum prestige. That's the supporting actor paradox in action. The industry loves to mistake supporting brilliance for leading man inevitability, and Cuba became the textbook example. Then came the additional damage: personal controversies, lawsuits. A late career pivot into direct-to-video thrillers signaled to studios that Cuba had quietly left the A-list ecosystem. Even when comeback attempts like Selma and American Crime Story showed flashes of the performer he had been, none were enough to erase a decade of brand erosion. This is because when audiences watch a performer rise too fast, they expect consistency. But in this case, what they got was fragmentation. And as we move into the next case, that fragmentation starts to look almost merciful, because unlike Cuba, whose career wasn't undone by power structures, our next actor's career was. And the forces working against her were far more calculated, far more insidious, and far less forgiving. Number 2, Mira Sorvino. In the 90s, Mira Sorvino's career looked like the blueprint of a typical Hollywood success story. She had the rare combination studios crave: Ivy League intellect, natural charm, and a sense of maturity that set her apart from her peers. She could do comedy without mugging, drama without melodrama, and she seemed poised for a career that would stretch from prestige dramas to high-end studio fare. Then came Mighty Aphrodite, and suddenly she wasn't just promising anymore, she was extraordinary. Sorvino took a stereotype the industry had recycled for decades and rebuilt it from the inside. Her performance was bright, sharp, and unexpectedly soulful, the kind of role critics champion because it feels like a rediscovery of a genre cliché. That year's Oscar wasn't just deserved, it felt like an announcement that a major new talent had arrived. Everyone assumed the next step was obvious: prestige leads, awards, contenders, and collaborations with great directors. And truthfully, that's where her story should have gone. But the real story took a somewhat darker turn. In the years after her win, Sorvino's scripts got weaker, the budgets got smaller, the releases got quieter, and the industry, instead of questioning why an Oscar-winning actress had vanished from the center of the conversation, shrugged and assumed she'd simply cooled off. Only later did the truth surface. Sorvino's career didn't fade, it was sabotaged, and the perpetrator was none other than Rikers Island's most famous inmate, Harvey Weinstein. It is reported that Harvey retaliated after she rejected his advances. Peter Jackson also publicly revealed that Weinstein instructed his team to remove her from consideration for Lord of the Rings, a franchise designed to mint global careers. Looking back to the franchise, they weren't wrong, and that was only the example we heard about. Blacklisting doesn't happen loudly. It happens through sudden, creative differences, names quietly removed from shortlists, and studio executives who stop treating an actor as bankable. Before the Me Too era, women erased by power were simply assumed to have lost momentum. But back to Sorvino. After her blacklisting, she worked in smaller films, faith-based dramas, scattered TV roles, but none with the machinery needed to resurrect a derailed trajectory. Even after the Weinstein revelations brought public sympathy, Hollywood never fully course-corrected. And as we move into the next case, the question shifts. Yes, Sorvino's decline wasn't about talent, it was about power. But what happens when an actor's entire rise depends on one power source? And what happens when that source suddenly disappears? Number 3. Adrien Brody. Before The Pianist, Adrien Brody lived in that rare space between critics know him and audiences sort of recognize him. He had an off-center magnetism, angular features, restless energy, and an intensity that didn't always fit Hollywood's leading man template. He stood out in indie films, and directors loved him for the same reason. Studios hesitated. He didn't look or behave like anyone else. He was a supporting standout, but not yet the kind of actor studios build entire campaigns around. Then came The Pianist, and everything changed overnight. Brody didn't just deliver a great performance, he delivered one of the great performances of the century. He transformed himself physically, emotionally, and spiritually. He stripped everything down to silence, stillness, and starvation. And in doing so, he became the youngest Best Actor winner in history, winning a role so demanding that most actors don't encounter something similar more than once in a lifetime. Hollywood expected the trajectory from there to be linear. It expected that Brody would become the next Daniel Day-Lewis, that next deeply committed, prestige-anchoring chameleon. Filmmakers assumed he would move from auteur to auteur, building a career defined by master directors and challenging scripts. But what actually happened was the opposite. Once the Oscar glow faded, Brody discovered he had no cinematic home. Roman Polanski had shaped and protected that performance, but no comparable auteur stepped in to guide the next chapter. Without that grounding force, Brody drifted into roles that didn't complement his strengths, films that wanted his intensity but not his nuance, or that cast him as a standard leading man when he's anything but. The result was a series of misfires that chipped away at his prestige. The Village relied on atmosphere rather than performance. The Jacket failed to connect. King Kong overshadowed him with spectacle, and Predators tried to sell him as an action hero he was never built to play. The truth was that Hollywood didn't know what he was, so it tried everything, and almost none of it fit. As prestige projects cooled, he pivoted to international thrillers, straight-to-video crime films, scattered genre experiments, roles far beneath an actor who once redefined wartime minimalism. Today, he's a respected but underused performer in search of the right director rather than another award. I do hope to see him at his best soon. And as we move into the next case, this theme of misalignment evolves. We know Brody struggled because Hollywood didn't know what to do with him. Well, our next actress knew exactly what she wanted, took the big studio swing, and found out the blockbuster world can be just as limiting. Number 4. Halle Berry. In the 90s, Halle Berry was already a rising force, magnetic in Boomerang, striking in Bulworth, and instantly iconic in X-Men. She had presence, versatility, and a charisma most actors would kill for. Hollywood knew she was a star. The only question was how big she would become. Then Monsters Ball happened. Here, Berry delivered a performance so raw and emotionally exposed that it permanently changed how audiences saw her. And when she won Best Actress, she didn't just make history. She became the only black woman ever to win the award, a milestone so monumental it reshaped the industry's expectations overnight. Suddenly, she was positioned as the next defining actress of the 2000s. Studios wanted her in prestige dramas. They wanted her in tentpole spectacles. They wanted her to be both a serious thespian and a box office anchor at the same time. And that impossible double expectation created the fracture that would ultimately derail her post-win momentum. Because once the blockbuster machine got hold of her, everything changed. Instead of roles that deepened her range, she found herself headlining studio projects that played to surface-level qualities like beauty, toughness, and attitude. Catwoman became the infamous turning point, but it was only one piece of a larger pattern as Gothica, Perfect Stranger, Dark Tide, and even Movie 43 derailed her Oscar momentum. These were films built around set pieces and style rather than emotional complexity. Even the X-Men franchise, which should have been a safe anchor, sidelined Storm into a supporting figure with minimal arc. And behind the misfires were larger systemic issues. You see, in the 2000s and early 2010s, Hollywood simply wasn't making many serious adult dramas centered on black women. Even fewer were being produced at the scale that supports an A-list Oscar winner. Bias, limited imagination, and industry caution created a landscape where Berry had nowhere to go, so she was pushed into action-heavy, concept-driven scripts that couldn't sustain her talent. Still, every now and then, the brilliance resurfaces. She was electric in John Wick 3. And Bruised, her directorial debut, showed ambition and grit that hinted at a comeback still waiting to fully materialize. But now, we're moving from a blockbuster drowning to something even more dramatic. Our next case is a rare Hollywood phenomenon where the actor's follow-up project wasn't just a misstep, it was a career catastrophe. Number 5. Roberto Benigni. Before his Oscar triumph, Roberto Benigni was Italy's comedic heartbeat. An actor, writer, and performer beloved for his manic warmth and physical exuberance. On stage and on screen, he was a national treasure, a comedian with a poet's touch, but outside Europe, he was still more of a curiosity than a household name. Then Life is Beautiful changed everything. Benigni didn't just star in it, he co-wrote, directed, and embodied one of the most audacious tonal balancing acts in cinematic history. His performance drew global acclaim, and his Oscar win became a cultural event, complete with his legendary chair-climbing celebration. Hollywood suddenly saw him as a once-in-a-generation auteur, someone who might carve out a Chaplin-like international career, whimsical, humanist, and universally appealing. And that's where the expectations became dangerous, because when an actor-director wins an Oscar with a global hit, their follow-up is treated like destiny. And Benigni's next project, Pinocchio, wasn't just a disappointment. It was an outright catastrophe. A 0% Rotten Tomatoes score, critical ridicule, and widespread mockery turned what should have been his triumphant next chapter into an industry cautionary tale. Its financial collapse only made things worse. Overnight, the Hollywood door that had opened so brightly slammed shut. Studios that once saw him as a magical import now viewed him as a risky, self-indulgent filmmaker whose style didn't translate to dollar bills. His brand of slapstick lyricism, so beloved in Italy, felt dated, almost alien, to American audiences in the early 2000s. And instead of recalibrating, Benigni retreated, stepping away from the kind of high-profile filmmaking that could have rebuilt his momentum. This is the unforgiving reality. When you're fresh off an Oscar win, one colossal flop doesn't just bruise your career, it can erase it internationally. Benigni became a symbol of that one-strike harshness, someone whose entire trajectory reversed because his next step happened to be the wrong one. In recent years, he's had softer re-entries into prestige spaces, most notably as Geppetto in the 2019 Pinocchio, where he was warmly received. And in Italy, he still remains cherished. Globally, he's still a faded memory of an astonishing peak. Moving on from Benigni's career, which was undone by a single disastrous film, we shift into a different kind of derailment, one driven by industry politics and retaliation. Number 6. Mo'Nique. Before her Oscar win, Mo'Nique was known almost exclusively as a force of comedic energy, bold, loud, hilarious, and magnetic. She was a stand-up fixture, a sitcom star, and a performer whose strengths lived in big personalities and sharp punchlines. Nobody, not even her biggest fans, saw her as someone Hollywood would groom for dramatic awards. Well, that was until Precious rewrote every assumption about her. Her performance as Mary Lee Johnson was a shockwave. Venomous, wounded, monstrous, and tragically human. Critics didn't just praise it, they declared it seismic. And when she won the Oscar, it felt like a career-redefining coronation, the kind that signals a long future of bold, dramatic work. For a moment, everyone expected she'd pivot into weighty prestige films and become one of Hollywood's most unpredictable talents. But the real story, the one everyone remembers, is what happened next. Mo'Nique refused to do unpaid award season promotion, citing family, health, and basic fairness. That one decision clashed violently with Hollywood's unwritten rules. Supporting actors are expected to be tireless campaign machines. Behind the scenes, she claimed that Lee Daniels, Tyler Perry, and Oprah Winfrey helped brand her as difficult. The industry whisper network took hold, and in Hollywood, a whisper is often more powerful than a resume. The narrative hardened fast. Mo'Nique didn't play the game. And while the Academy may celebrate rebellion on stage, behind closed doors, awards, seasoned politics demand obedience. The expectation that supporting winners must work for the win became the very reason her career stalled. Her refusal marked her as unreliable in the eyes of studios, and suddenly the prestigious scripts stopped coming. The industry had decided she broke the rules. Roles dried up as fast as they came. She was pushed to the margins, featuring in small indies, faith-based films, and projects far beneath the talent she displayed in Precious. Her public conflict with Netflix years later only cemented her reputation as someone Hollywood didn't want to deal with, regardless of whether her grievances were valid. And now, leaving a case defined by domestic political fallout, we shift into something different. A performer whose win created expectations Hollywood couldn't sustain internationally. Number 7. Jean Dujardin. Before ever coming to the US, Jean Dujardin was already a titan in France, headlining hit comedies, thriving on stage, and becoming a household name through OSS 117 and other sleek old-school comedic vehicles. At home, he was a proven brand, charming, expressive, and effortlessly funny. But in the US, he was virtually unknown, seen more as a foreign novelty than a rising global superstar. Then, the artist changed everything. His performance, part silent era homage, part physical acting masterclass, became the centerpiece of a film that conquered award season. Dujardin radiated charisma without a single line of spoken dialogue, and when he won Best Actor, it felt like America had discovered a new classic leading man. For a brief moment, the industry believed he might become the next Gerard Depardieu, a French import who could juggle European prestige and Hollywood scale. And that's where the cracks began. Hollywood expected him to slide seamlessly into English language cinema, but the reality was far more complicated. His heavy accent, while charming, instantly limited what US casting directors could do with him. There simply aren't many mainstream roles written for middle-aged French men, and Hollywood isn't known for rewriting scripts to accommodate foreign leads. Even beyond language, his comedic rhythm, rooted in French timing and physicality, didn't fit the cleaner, sharper comedic conventions of American film. The mismatch ran both ways. Hollywood didn't quite know how to use him, and Dujardin didn't push hard to adapt. Unlike other international winners who aggressively pursue US careers, he preferred working in France, where he had creative freedom, steady stardom, and roles built around his strengths. As a result, American visibility faded with surprising speed. A few supporting parts here and there, but nothing remotely close to capitalizing on an Oscar win. His case highlights a broader truth. Foreign actors who win big often discover the statue doesn't translate into Hollywood longevity. The system rarely invests heavily in non-native English-speaking leads unless they already fit a global blockbuster mold. Dujardin didn't, and never tried to. That's the real pattern. An Oscar doesn't guarantee stability. It magnifies the environment an actor steps into next, whether that's supportive or ruthless. These actors didn't stumble because they lacked talent. They stumbled because the industry around them didn't know how to handle their success. For some, the Oscar created impossible expectations. For others, it triggered retaliation, exposed systemic bias, or pushed them into roles that didn't suit their voice. And in a few cases, one disastrous follow-up was all it took to slam the brakes on momentum. So, which actors do you think their Oscar win derailed their career? And if you want more breakdowns like this, hit subscribe because we've got plenty more film analysis coming.